Welcome back. In the next discussion, our moderator is going to be Orsolya Ludwig, head of the Center for Corporate Communication at MCC. The discussion will focus on the effective concepts of advertising revenue.
Thank you very much, and may I introduce and ask my guests to step on stage and also take your places, please. Zach Christensen, editor of The Spectator in the US. Marcial Cuquerella, was that right? Thank you. From 7NN Television. Then I'm really happy to have a lady in the panel as well. Klaudia Kosaras, director at Media, and Colin Morrison, founder and publisher of Flashes Flames Media. So welcome to Budapest, and welcome to this panel. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Now, obviously, there's a reason for this conference. Because we all feel that media landscape is rapidly changing in the past years. And I think it now reached a level where also the secondary effects need to be elaborated on, like advertising now. Most recently, I've seen an interview with a gentleman, Jeremy Jonesy, yeah, that was his name, who's CEO of Beautiful Destinations, which is now a very successful company. It was named one of the most innovative companies in travel and leisure industry. And his business started as an Instagram account, and now he's multi-million revenue organization. And he said that, especially in travel and leisure, people don't look at advertising. They don't search Google at all. People just use hashtags, they use TikTok, Instagram, social platforms like that. And content is king, we all know. Videos basically took over the role of advertising. How do you see that? Do you see this only in these industries that mostly younger people or the new generation is interested in, or do you see this as a general tendency? Maybe Zach.
Yeah, sure. I think what you're actually seeing is a trend of advertising going to these niche products, right? So advertising might be leaving Facebook and Google. They're not really leaving Facebook and Google, but some of it's starting to migrate to some of these more niche products. And I think you talk about how young people don't look at advertising. I think that they're actually looking at lots of advertising. They just might not realize it. They're looking at sponsored content on Instagram, on TikTok, places like that. So I would imagine a decent amount of revenue from his Instagram and his TikTok come from hotels and that sort of thing who are looking to advertise. And I think that's sort of that's where a lot of the advertising action is today in niche products, right? So if you can build small audiences, for him it's a big audience now, but if you can build small audiences that are incredibly targeted, there are people that want to reach those audiences. Colin's newsletter is actually a perfect example of it. I think Colin's newsletter is a very small audience, but it's an extremely influential group of people. And I don't think Colin does advertising, but he probably could if he wanted to, because it might just be 5,000 people out there that you want to target, but you're creating an audience, and you're creating an audience with newsletters, with social media, and so by curating these audiences, you're creating better targeted people for advertising.
But that's not the traditional above the line. So that is what may be transferring. How do you see that?
Well, I guess it depends on the target you are focusing on. The new millennial way of acquiring content and focusing is looking through a wide a wide ratio of things and not focusing on one thing for more than 2-3 minutes. So you have to get through them and to get to them in another way. But for me, I can watch a whole football game, for example, with Real Madrid, and consume all the content and all the advertising that is put there, put through the T-shirts, through the walls, and this is advertising too. I guess one of the main things that are now the fashion of the advertising is the brand content. And I asked once the president of Abbas what branded content was for him and what he thought about what were his thoughts about brand content. And he told me, Marcial, brand content is like teenager sex. Everybody talks about it. Almost anybody has practiced it, and those who practice them was a complete failure. So if the president of Abbas thinks about brand content like this, I guess we have a very long way to go to understand what is the rich potential of the millennials.
Absolutely. We speak about publishing, so let's maybe check traditional media. Claudia, how do you see that? So advertising that lives, that strives for sure. We see a lot of content, influencers, whoever, but that there's this shift. So what do magazines, TV, billboards, so the traditional media takes do?
Thank you. They are still alive, I would say, especially in Hungary. So I say this because I live in Hungary and I work on this market, but I would say that TV is still important for advertisers. And yes, a lot of money or revenues are put into Instagram and those social media channels in order to influence the youngest audiences. However, the question is, where is the purchase power? So from the advertiser's point of view, if you want to sell like a mobile phone or the water or whatever products you have, you still have to reach massive audiences in order to sell your products. And TV and outdoor and of course digital, the traditional digital channels are still important.
How do you see that?
I think the complementary comments I'd make to my colleagues there is just to say that I think that advertising used to be a very blunt industry, and risk aversion has got a lot to, advertising aversion has got a lot to do with being presented with ads that you're not interested in, that are just directed to all 10 million people in the country at the same time. And the internet came along and not only made advertisers work harder, but actually gave them the opportunity to track advertising, to target advertising, to make it very bespoke, and to get response levels and so on. Old-fashioned media, if you like, the advertiser takes all the risk. Modern media, digitally, you pay for what you get, more or less. And I think those are very important things, because I think the other part of that, and if you like, young audiences being advertising averse, but still getting, as Zach says, still seeing a lot of advertising, because the advertising you want to see and the messages you want to see don't strike you as advertising. But then the other part of all this is that I think on the very positive side, digital is great for authenticity. It's great for the advertiser who wants to reach specific groups of people. But it's also great because where advertising works best, and picking up the content marketing point, is when it's really relevant to why you're there in the first place. If you're reading a magazine about a subject you're really interested in, if you're interested in cars or boats or something, and there's a stonking great ad for frozen chips, then that's kind of offensive. It's not authentic. It doesn't belong there. And therefore, the opportunity for kind of vertical slices and specialist media to get, if anything, more advertising, I think is greater than it ever was before. Because certainly in the UK, well over half of all advertising appears in, the big people, Facebook, Google, and Amazon. But actually in some of the smaller specialist areas, particularly in magazines, they're doing okay, and they're not being nearly as badly hit as newspapers, who after all were once the biggest media and have now been replaced in that role by Google, etc.
Yeah, and that revenue is strongly missing. Let's check the advertising cake. How does that look like? Maybe start with Hungary, we're the hometown here.
Well, that's not an easy question, because according to the published numbers, digital is around 50% or owns 50% of the whole advertising cake, but part of the revenues or expenditures is only estimated. So we don't know any published data about the international owners like Facebook and Google, so it's only an estimate. So therefore I would say that TV is around 40%. I think it's closer to the reality, and digital is around 25%. So I don't think it's as high as in the US or the Western European countries for digital. But about the international players, nobody knows any official data.
And what's the change, let's say, maybe past 3-5 years? What has changed?
Of course, digital is increasing, yeah, and at the expense of the newspapers. Radio is around 6%, so quite a low share.
Only on expense of the newspapers? Only print is struggling?
Print and outdoor as well. TV is there. TV could actually increase revenues last year compared to the previous years. Of course, the COVID year was like a decrease, a slight decrease, but TV is on 2019 level or even higher.
Okay. How about your countries? How did that change in the past few years?
Yeah, it's been, obviously, around the world, advertising's been sort of steadily dropping. I couldn't give you the numbers off the top of my head of what that pie looks like. I can say, though, that most media companies now are focusing on subscriptions as they see their advertising revenue drop. These general interest magazines, general interest newspapers are focusing on subscriptions. So, the New York Times is basically a subscription business now. They obviously do lots of advertising revenue, but they have 15 million subscribers. And so, for us at the Spectator, if you broke it down, it's certainly a majority. It's almost probably 65-70% of our revenue comes from subscriptions now. Another piece of it, maybe 15% is events, and maybe another 15% is advertising. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. So, as advertising starts to dwindle with these sort of general interest publications, I think publishers are looking for more revenue, and they're going for subscriptions. I think those ad dollars, though, are just going to other places, like we said before. They're going either digital or they're going into sort of sponsored content, podcasting, newsletters, that sort of thing. You're seeing in the U.S. You're seeing. We'll see how successful it is, but you're seeing this huge surge of newsletters, which I think, in the U.S. it's sort of, I think we may have started the trend. I think it's starting to pick up in the U.K. and some other countries. But we have like local newsletters now. Like we saw a decimation of the local news industry, but now we've started to see these hyper-local newsletters pop up. And you're starting to see advertising dollars go towards those because they know, these, I think these, advertisers, local advertisers, are starting to see less bang for their buck in Google and Facebook, and they're looking to sort of target that hyper-local audience. So I think you're starting to see that surge, but on a very small scale. But I think you are starting to see it.
How about you?
Well, my business is TV, so that's what I know. I don't really have insights about the press and all the other stuff, but in TV the advertising market is around 1.8 billion American euros. So it happens to be a very not public regulated but very private regulated market. So if you have 1 point in a market of 1.8 billion euros, you have 1 point of share. It should correspond to you 18 millions of advertising revenue. And that, it happens. It happens. There are two big players there, which is Mediaset and A3 Media, which are Italian-owned, which is ironic. They have the 80% of the market and 60% of the share, so they are powerful. But and the market share is in television is declining very slowly, because the advertising is very strong there in Spain. It's declining and is going to online websites and podcasting, not so much podcasting, online websites, but TV stations are doing also the same travel. So the money that goes to the online, we receive them also. So it keeps everything at home. The fact is that the private regulation is that the company who makes the metrics is like the standard of the market. It's Kantar, and Kantar tells you statistically what is your share. And if you have 0.5, or which is what I have right now, if you have 0.5, then you go to the ad sales and to the brands, and you tell them I have 0.5, so I need the 0.5 investment of your budget, and that's it.
Okay, but you also experienced the shift, and I think that is.
Yeah, but we are not worried about that. Yeah, there's a shift, but we are trying to move as fast as the shift is happening.
I think the target group is key here, because the target group for the audience for TV or traditional media is growing older, and so the new generations wonder what they will do. How do you see that in the UK? What's the advertising pie like?
Well, I mean, in the UK, what's interesting to take something like television is that the biggest TV advertising network in the UK is something called ITV. And that's the biggest collection of an audience you can get for any period of time. You know, it's a real mass medium. It has, roughly speaking, the same advertising revenue, perhaps a little bit inflation increase in the last 5 or 10 years, but it has about 25 or 30% smaller audience. And so what you have there is traditional mass market advertisers who want to reach 5 or 10 million people in one go watching a soap opera or a sport, can't easily go anywhere else, so they go there. But gradually, of course, what has really happened in taking those numbers is that they've now got a bigger share of the advertising than their audience deserves, if you take it by comparison with what the audience used to be, because the audience has been filleted by streaming and online and everything else. I think for me though, the whole thing about digital is that it is made for specialists and made for personalization. And good media businesses, like any other businesses, have to own something. You have to own a distinctive way of doing something in content terms. You have to own an audience, if not actually own them, at least capture a unique mood. And in advertising terms, if you can do that, if you've got an audience that people want to reach, and they're really yours, and you have authentic content that isn't just stolen from somebody else, but is something that only you are doing, then that is an advertising medium if you want it to be. There is a trap, as we know, from how newspapers and magazines have been in the reasonably recent past, and that it's a bit of a trap if you have a business that has quite a large amount of readership revenue and quite a large amount of advertising, because you can risk the advertising wagging the tail of the dog. It's easier to stay faithful to readers when you're really dependent on them financially. But it is that point of you should be trying to own something. And if you own something, if you have the content that gives you the ownership, as I say, of an audience in some way, then advertisers will buy that, because that in this world, that becomes a measurable audience and it's measurability that the internet has brought us, and that ultimately gets you advertising revenue if you want it.
Obviously. Looking at your industry in your own countries, what gives you, and this is a question to all of you, what gives you headache nowadays? What's the major pain point?
I wouldn't say it gives me a headache. I'll answer what I think about a lot. And I think I'll actually just start piggybacking on what Colin was just talking about, which is owning your audience. And I think through the last decade, we saw media companies try to deliver content through different social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, those things. And really what I want to do and what I think is sort of the future is making sure that you own your audience, right? So getting people to your website, getting people to whatever outlet you have, collecting their information and owning that. We're seeing the decline of like third-party data and advertising networks. And I think like first-party data is going to be king. And so if you have that audience, if you have that first-party data, you're going to be more valuable on a couple of fronts. One of them in converting those people to subscribers, if you can convert your audience to a paid audience. But two, you're going to be able to sell that audience to an advertiser if you can sell directly to that advertiser. So those are the things that I think about a lot, in terms of what I think the future is and what we're trying to build for, and building that audience and owning our audience and not having to go through a third party to get that audience is important for us.
Right, Marcial?
For me, apart from cash, which is the most, apart from it, I guess that what strikes me the most is the complete lack of professionalism in the journalism profession right now. Let me put you an example. Yesterday night, one guy entered with a katana in a church in Algeciras, in Spain, in the south of Spain, entered with a katana and killed one priest and hurt another one who is now very grave and he's bound to die. The guy was a jihadist, so it was a terrorist attack, and he was from Morocco. The whole media outlet, and you can see right now if you take a look, the whole media outlet put the killing like a priest deceased, like dead by a katana. So no terrorist attack, no jihadist attack, nobody took the katana to kill the man and the other one, because it's not politically correct. It happened a lot. It's in my country, so I can speak in regarding Spain. It happened a lot in the whole Trump election and everything, that our journalists, they strictly replicated what New York Times told the day before. So if you wanted to see what the major TV station or what the biggest journal, the biggest newspaper was going to say, you only needed to read the New York Times the day before, because they were special correspondents there in New York, but they didn't even leave the hotel. They get the newspapers, they copy the newspapers, and that was the main message. It happens always. So what brings me headaches is that we don't have, well, there are very few exceptions, but we don't have journalists that look for the truth. They are not curious. They are just dispensers of the press notes that other outlets give.
I fully get that. My background is corporate communications. This is what I also teach here in the university program, and I can just confirm that it's very often copy-paste. Corporate announcements, then copy-paste, and it's I get that. We will touch upon this in a minute, but let me move on to Claudia. What is your pain point nowadays?
It's not easy to say anything after this story, but as sales house or as the market leader sales house in Hungary, I would definitely say the money and I would say some kind of uncertainty. So we have the deals set for TV advertising, like we are ready. We were ready in December. We have deals negotiated for this year. However, it's still a question whether we can get those revenues through the agencies from the advertisers, because even agencies and the advertisers themselves cannot tell us whether they will have the money in May, June, or the end of the year, whether they can fulfill their commitments. And this is true for TV somehow, but also for digital and especially radio, because we also represent 80% of the available radio stations in Hungary, and also we have digital channels to represent, and those media channels are they are easy to outplan from the media plans by the advertisers. TV is stronger because of the commitments and the deals, but I would say that some kind of uncertainty gives us some headache nowadays, or what we talk about a lot. And on the other hand, in terms of TV, the streaming and the rise of the streaming platforms in terms of the viewership, what gives us some headache. At the expense of the linear TV. However, linear TV is still strong in Hungary, so advertisers can easily build up the reach for the campaigns. However, the streaming platforms still, especially the younger audiences from the linear TV channels.
Right, how about UK?
Well, not specifically the UK, although the UK is a nice big media market. I mean, I'm just a total optimist about all these things, because it's true that there's a lot of bad journalism. There's perhaps a lot more bad journalism than there used to be, but I think there's a lot more good journalism as well. There's a huge amount of new journalistic and other kinds of media activity. If something troubles me in any way about this free flow, it is during the settle down period, and this is a transitional period in so many ways. We perhaps have still quite large percentages of the population who don't really know where to turn for what might be accurate or true, but that isn't because it isn't there. That's because people are getting used to what there is and where they look for it and how they judge it. We come from a position where you used to have a printing press. You used to have either a printing press or a broadcasting license and a mast in order to have any kind of media. And as we heard this morning, a laptop can do it for you now. That's an amazing opportunity, and I'll put up with all the rubbish that irritates me as much as it does everybody else, because of the positive of all of that.
All right, thank you. So going back to the issue with journalism or media, there is a recent survey of the Edelman Research Institute. Maybe you've heard of it. They ask in, I think, around 30 countries each year, people, the whole society, how they feel, how they trust different platforms like governments, media, corporations, etc. And this survey in the past few years shown a very strong downward spiral for trust in media. Basically, in 2022, corporations were the most trusted platform regarding news sources. So how do you see that? Is this lack of trust or distrust, I can call it that, does this affect also advertising that is in that specific media platform, or is that independent in your view? Or how do you see this issue? Let's start in Spain, because you also mentioned this problem.
Thank you. I guess that people are looking in the wrong direction for the consumption of information. I mean, we should not mistake information for knowledge or for interpretation. The fact that a tomato is a fruit, that's information. But the fact that you shouldn't put a tomato in a salad fruit, that's knowledge, and that's interpretation. So those are both ways to confront the world. What people are looking right now is not information, it's interpretation, because you can get it informed in Twitter fast enough and faster than any kind of media company. I remember when everything changed for me, when I think everything changed in matter of information, was when Bin Laden was killed. That Obama announced that he was going to bring a press conference, and everybody knew that it was Bin Laden's killing, because a neighbor was tweeting right away, real time, helicopter hovering above Abbottabad. This is a rare event. And then he started to tell everything what happened in the operation. So information went through the whole phones right away. And then came the interpretation. So what people are looking for and the trust put, like they are looking for information when they are consuming interpretation. That's not the same. And regarding and you should bear in mind that if you are consuming a media because you are looking for interpretation, not information. Information you can get it whenever you want. And regarding advertising, I guess the brands they only have one requirement, which is quality and volume. If you have volume and they can relate to your quality, you are not going to have problems. And I guess that's another question that you haven't made, but I want to answer that the brands, they don't have ideology normally. They don't have biases. Maybe we some conservative media put the guilt on the brands, but the guilt is that our quality is poor. We need to do the best as we can to offer the best quality for our customers and for our clients, and that's another issue.
I can fully confirm that, coming as said from corporate communications. This is really, we're not biased. We're biased by reaching people and reaching the audiences. How is it in the US, this distrust issue? I'm pretty sure you face that problem.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's as much of a distrust issue with advertising as in the U.S. I think that there's a apprehension to advertise against things that are controversial or incendiary. And so, you know, when I travel to Europe and I look at magazines, political magazines and newspapers, I see lots of premium brands advertising in political magazines. You just don't see that in the U.S. They're too afraid to put their ads next to either conservative or liberal content. You know, in the U.S. we have, you know, like National Review on one end and Mother Jones on the other end, and you don't see any sort of premium ads anywhere. So I think in the U.S. we've always had that, and I think that is why you see advertising like by premium brands in sort of the non-controversial media, and that's why you see a lot of advertising going to, it's why the New York Times can still get great premium advertisers, because they have the style section, they have the travel section, they have things like that that are not controversial at all. I mean, we still have controversies over if there's an incendiary op-ed online and some brand's programmatic advertising shows up next to it, people flip out, and so. I think that's really the issue in the U.S. for us, and so you don't really see that sort of advertising for that reason.
Right. Colin, may I turn to you? How do you see this trust issue?
Yeah, I think part of it, and the Reuters Institute findings are very interesting because they show that the UK is among the worst for the decline in trust in media, or in newspapers probably. Which, you know, is a bit disturbing, but given that the UK has had this strong tradition of big daily newspapers, I've got a feeling, though, that it's much, you know, what's woven through these kinds of findings in this kind of research is firstly, what politicians say about media on all sides. You know, if they attack media outlets in a way that traditionally nobody did. And of course, nobody attacked them in the past because there was a very small number of them. And if you're a politician, you needed them as friends as best you could. Now, you're emboldened by the fact that on Twitter, more people will see your message than in the Times of London or something. So I think that's the first thing. So I think there's something slightly phony going on there. The other thing is politically, right across the world, these are really troubling times. And I don't think, of course it's reflected in media, and it's reflected by media of all kinds. But, you know, right across this world, there are, in my humble opinion, there are a lot more people who are anxious about their world than there probably have been since the Second World War. And so any kind of, you know, Reuters Institute has this well-funded research into media. I suspect that if they weren't a news sort of organisation and they just dealt in what people were thinking about their world and their lives, they'd get the same kind of findings. So I think that because there's more media now than ever before, and we're all saying it, it gets exaggerated. That would be my optimistic view of the world.
Claudia?
So the trust issue, I think it exists in our market as well, but it depends on the target audiences. Like, for example, for the younger target audiences, the influencers on Instagram can work, or they do work, or on YouTube. But for the older or more mature target audiences, the traditional media still works. So we have done a research last year with a research company, Ipsos, and it came out that for the 50-plus ages target audience, TV and digital is still or are still trusted information sources. And for the advertisers, or from the advertiser point of view, I think it's important that they want to be their brands displayed in a brand-safe environment. So that's why we have like some unions, companies on the media market to explain to advertisers why it is important to be brand-safe and therefore to use rather the local digital channels and not like the international ones where brand safety might be an issue.
Yeah, I fully get that. Just as a final question, because we're running out of time and we want to give the floor to the audience questions. Obviously, there needs to be some innovation for traditional media. We are speaking about publishing, so let's go back there a bit. And okay, I know TikTok and Instagram, but now let's move back from there. So do you have a suggestion, a recommendation to the traditional platforms, how to innovate, how to get back a bit of that revenue just to keep them alive? Maybe in this round.
Yeah, I'll actually, this is going to be an unsatisfying answer, but I'm a big proponent of just fundamentals. Put out great content and get people to read it. And so, you know, so like going after like all of the shiny new things that people love to go after, TikTok and Instagram. I mean, certainly you have, you know, you should experiment with those platforms and see what you can do with those platforms and use those platforms. But, you know, on our team, sometimes I have to, you know, drive home that it's important for us to just get the things right, the basics right. So if you're doing great reporting, if you're putting out great stories, and you you know, are able to charge for those stories, then you're ahead of the game. And I think that you can do a lot of chasing of innovation, I suppose. I mean, I guess how you define innovation. But if you look at, you know, the media success stories in the U.S., you know, it is people just looking at the basics, going back to fundamentals. Obviously, you have to, you know, put a digital twist on it, right? I mean, we have new platforms and that sort of thing. But what the New York Times is doing right now isn't a lot different than what they were doing, 15, 20 years ago. They've layered in some new products, which I think are really great, and that's driving retention and that's driving subscriptions. But what they're doing is what they've always done, which is they've done great journalism, right? And so they've done great stories. They've added like New York Times Cooking app, they've added the Games app, they've added things like that. They understand that the reason people bought the newspaper 30 years ago was not for what was on the front page. They bought the newspaper for the film review, or the film listings and the TV listings and the comics and the food pages, crossword puzzles. So what they did was they just applied that to to the internet. It's not, I wouldn't call it innovative. I'd call it the fundamentals of 2022. So I think that's what I focus on, and that's like the advice that I would give to people is you just have to do your job. Create good stuff.
Thanks.
Well, innovation is like teenager sex. I guess everybody wants to be there. But the one sole focus on the innovation taken in the media is I'm a businessman, so I should answer that question with only one word: monetization. You should be whenever you can monetize your content. Of course, regarding that your content has quality, but that's not my business. That's the business of the journalist. That's why I think that a media outlet or a media company it must not be managed by a journalist, but by a businessman. Because the sole focus of the media company regarding the quality is it's monetization. So if you want to be on TikTok, okay, what's the revenue? Okay, let's do TikTok, but how are you monetize it? Because we are not here we are not teenagers. So innovation must be focused on that. That's my take.
I think that's good. So everyone who's involved in traditional media, I think, keep that in mind. Claudia, you're selling media. What do you suggest?
For traditional stations or TV stations?
Yes, and press.
Yeah, of course, the quality content is really important, and to make it available for other audiences as well. So if you have like a digital channel, like you are a TV station and you have a digital channel, you must be there on the digital channel with quality content as well. So that's why now market-leading TV channels are transforming their digital channels into some kind of streaming platforms and produce special content to the streaming platforms as well. So not only for the linear TV, but a different content for the TV digital platform as a streaming, because that's the trend now, and young audiences are watching those platforms. So be sexy, I would say.
Another very good advice. Colin.
Yeah, less interesting than teenage sex is, I think it's easy in a discussion about journalism and so on to say, of course, journalism is the most important thing, and the content in whatever medium is vitally important. Without unique, authentic, valuable, well-produced, well-packaged content, you don't have a business. But you also don't have a business unless you really have a well-thought-out business plan, a business model. And and the New York Times is just a great example for us all. We've all talked about it a lot, and Zach mentioned it there. And it's absolutely true that it's full of all kinds of journalism. It's packed full of stuff, much of which it's been doing for tens of years. But they did change quite a lot of things, because the crossword, you can now, hundreds of thousands of people subscribe only to the crossword, or only to the food, or only to the parenting. And that is a dramatic shift in a business model. And that is not an accident. They're not just publishing and saying, well, why don't we do this? They've thought about what it means to come from analog to digital. in analog, you produce a newspaper, you have to print it all together, package it all together, send it out all together. It's a manufacturing job. Digital, we know how bespoke it can be and how it can slice and dice. And in the future, presumably more and more of that. And really thinking out the business model at exactly the same, you know, if you're starting today at exactly the same time as you're thinking, well, what will the content be? What will the journalism be? You definitely can't regard as a secondary idea, how are we going to make money from it? That kind of isn't the way to do it. Because how can you judge journalism as if we'll judge whether that's good enough even before we've thought of who would like to read it? You know, the business model, who, for whom, in what way, how, price, distribution, timing, all those things are absolutely got to be there at the starting gate. And there's nothing innovative about that. People have been doing that for hundreds of years. But I think sometimes we lose that emphasis. When newspapers complain, as a lot of them do, about today's times and how difficult it is, what they're usually complaining about is how difficult it is to run the business with the business model of yesterday.
Yeah, and back to the basics is very often, you know, the innovation, using common sense again. We have a few questions, but let me also encourage you to post. I think we have very good opinions here. So here's one maybe, Marcial, for you. What do you think about companies like IKEA sabotaging and pulling back ads from publications they think unethical? How do you see that? It is also in this Edelman research that we've been mentioning. It said that companies tend to, you know, speak up about social issues, which is one way understandable and good when we're speaking about, you know, real sustainability issues, for example. But sometimes it's maybe a bit too much how they go into that. What do you think?
There's a question there that I can't. First of all, I don't fathom how can you project your voice so well without the mic. It's amazing.
I'll sing the song.
Are companies and politicians the people who own? Sorry, who owns the people, or the people who owns companies and politicians, and who tell them what to do? I think that's a vicious circle. There's a vicious circle. Politicians want to rule for the people to vote them. Not in a perfect world, but for the people to vote them. And then they rule, and the companies want to get to those rules and get to those budgets and get to those people based on the ruling of the people. So we get to a spiral that is not good at all. Maybe it's not the task for a bank to tell me if the Agenda 2030 is the sustainability. I just want you to take my money and give me some interest for my money. I don't really want. I'm a shareholder. I don't want to know about climate change or something like that. No? So the companies like Amazon, who are now paying for the abortions for their after Roe versus Wade, companies like that, they want to be the new priests of this new religion, because someone told them, and it's a reality, that they would get better results if they are they go with the mainstream, and the politicians then rule because of those companies who serve these people. I don't know what is the Gordian knot there, but I don't think that big companies that is the paper of big companies to intrude in certain parts of life.
Fully agree. We have a question, I think it's to all of you, and it can be our final round as well. Would you choose to influence, nudge, or advertise? Let's go the other way around. Colin.
Influence, what's the second one?
Nudge or advertise.
Influence, nudge, or advertise. Blimey, I don't even know I don't understand the question, let alone the answer.
I think it depends really on the product, right? That you're intending to show to the audience.
I mean, I suppose to take the one word that I kind of understand of those three, I mean, in advertising terms, it's, you know, I think we are all in the advertising business. If you're in media, you've got to package things up and present things in a way that attract an audience. And if you're in the advertising business itself, then attract advertisers. And I think perhaps, you know, in answering my version of that question, you know, we're in the journalism business, we're in the business model business, and we're also in the marketing business. So, you know, you can't get away from that.
Claudia?
I would say influence through advertising. That's so simple.
Clever, thank you.
I guess influence brings advertising, but advertising doesn't bring influence. So I'll take influence.
All right. Zach?
Yeah, I guess I'll echo that. I think, I mean, if I had a choice, I'd want to influence over anything else. I think that's probably the best way to reach your audience.
Yeah, obviously. So I think we have some good suggestions. Let me summarize. So focus on business, be sexy, back to the basics, and very good quality. I think if we note these, we're safe. And let's hope for the best for traditional media as well. Thank you very much for spending this time with me and the audience, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.